Supersized and overserved, scientists around the world make a desperate plea to stop an epidemic of obesity. But now new research goes beyond fat to reveal a risk that could be even greater. TechKnow explores the science of sugar. This is TechKnow, a show about innovations that can change lives. We're going to explore the intersection of hardware and humanity, and we're doing it in a unique way. This is a show about science by scientists. Sugar. It's the ingredient that brings smiles to the faces of children around the world. Health experts agree, in moderation, it's an essential part of nutrition. But it's also becoming the #1 culprit in a global health crisis. According to the World Health Organization, consumption of free sugars, especially sugary drinks, is behind a large increase in cases of obesity and diabetes. In 2014, 1 in 3 adults worldwide were reported to be overweight. By 2015, data showed 42 million children under the age of 5 were overweight or obese. 48% of those children were living in Asia and Africa. In Mexico, the problem is even worse. According to a study by Mexico's National Institute of Public Health, 70% of all adults are overweight or obese. Mexicans drink more soda than anywhere else on the planet. 163 litres a year per person. That's 40% more than the average American, who consumes 118 litres a year. In 2014, Mexico imposed a 10% excise tax on those drinks. The WHO is hoping more countries follow Mexico's example, calling for a global sugar tax to reduce consumption of sugary drinks. So far, France, Hungary, Ireland and the UK have or are considering such a tax. A growing body of research is behind these nutritional concerns. In 2014, a Harvard University study, Added Sugar Intake and Cardiovascular Diseases, looked at overall dietary sugar, not just in drinks, finding, quote, a significantly increased risk of CVD mortality. Research being conducted inside this laboratory in Davis, California, may be the first to show cause and effect. The project under the US National Institute of Health puts subjects on a highly controlled sugary diet for 10 weeks, then measures the effects of that added sugar.
I'm ready. Okay, let me set my timer here for 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
The cutting-edge research is being done at the Department of Molecular Bioscience School at the University of California at Davis. Professor Kimber Stanhope invited TechKnow inside her lab for the final phase of the trial. TechKnow's Marita Davison picks up the story behind the science of sugar.
It's early in the morning for this small group of college students. They're not here for a class. They are subjects in one of the most advanced sugar studies to date. In just a few moments, they will each undergo a magnetic resonance imaging exam. Doctors are most interested in what's been happening inside their bodies over the past 10 weeks. Hey guys, good morning.
Morning.
I know you guys are up bright and early for your scan, so we're gonna get you guys dressed and into the scanning room. Who's up first?
Benjamin.
This is day 70.
Paperwork.
The final day of the study. And Benjamin Lamb, Angela Osborne, and Yi Lor are ready for their MRIs.
You ready?
Dr. John McGann is one of the world's leading specialists in diagnostic radiology. He is supervising the imaging part of the trial.
The liver and also to the mid-abdomen on these.
Lor is a senior at UC Davis. He's a science student who decided to volunteer for the summer study.
So you probably remember it makes that loud buzzing, banging noise when it's taking the pictures. I'm going to give you some little foam earplugs.
Like the other subjects, Lore had a previous scan at the start of the trial. Doctors captured the before image of his abdominal region. This morning, they'll get the after.
It's quite an experience. It's something that I've never done before, and I think through this 10 week, I really learned a lot about myself. And
other than that, just hold really still and follow the breathing instructions. All right.
This technology is being used to chart what happens to internal organs when sugary drinks are consumed. Those results cannot be calculated by scales and are not visible to the naked eye. That's where the MRI comes in. Dr. McGann showed us exactly what he's looking for in the scan.
The key item that we're looking at in this study is this structure here, sort of a little darker or grayer structure, which is the liver. What we're trying to do, we do different MRI sequences, and then later on we go ahead and we calculate out the amount of fat within the liver, both pre and post study.
And why is liver fat important here?
Liver fat is important because it sort of helps and regulates a lot of different things within the body. Glucose metabolism, it also regulates the amount of triglycerides that we have circulating within the body. So it's actually sort of a clearing agent, you know, for a lot of different things. It produces cholesterol, so there's all sorts of different things the liver does.
And in order to really get a sense for this particular subject, you'd have to look at the scans as well.
Exactly, and we look at that both at the liver, so we calculate, well, how much fat is there in the liver before we started this study, and then all of a sudden we can go back again at the end of the study and we know exactly what our fat calculations are. How much fat is there at the end of the study? And then we compare those two. Is it decreased, is it the same, or is it increased in many of our study patients?
This latest sugar research should help Professor Stanhope and her team answer two important questions about sugary diets. Dr. Stanhope, tell me about the sugar study that you have going. What specifically are you looking to find out?
The first question is, does sugar undermine our health? By that I mean increased risk factors for cardiovascular disease.
So such as what, for example?
Cholesterol, that's the most obvious one. Does cardiovascular disease increase when you consume a high sugar diet even if you don't gain weight? Does sugar have a specific effect that other foods such as bread, oatmeal, rice do not have?
Now, your current study is focusing on subjects that are relatively young and healthy. Why?
If we prove in a relatively young, healthy person that sugar increases risk factors, have shown that this is a problem.
Stanhope's team will follow a total of 60 subjects over the course of 10 weeks. The group TechKnow was permitted to follow are all young, mid-20s, and apparently healthy. They are excited to see the finish line and exhausted from their dietary regimen.
This study was hard food-wise because being around your family, there's always fried chicken and mashed potatoes, and you have to stick with it.
it's really easy to be tempted to eat other food you're not supposed to and drink things you're not supposed to. So I would say the hardest part is just being disciplined.
It's been quite a challenge for me because I live with a couple of people who likes to cook, and whenever I smell their cooking, I just want to eat their food.
Through the course of the study, researchers strictly controlled the food consumed by each subject, specifically the amount of sugar and calories in their diet. The study is a single-blind study, meaning only the scientists know who is getting what. One group of 15 subjects will be given beverages sweetened by high-fructose corn syrup, the sweetener commonly found in soft drinks. A second group will get beverages sweetened by the artificial sweetener aspartame. Two other groups will get the same drinks, but they will be allowed to eat as much food as they'd like. The idea is to see if high-fructose corn syrup causes cardiovascular problems and if weight gain makes them worse. High fructose corn syrup is the sweetener used in the majority of those so-called sugary drinks, like soda. It was invented in 1971 by Japanese scientist Yoshiyuki Takasaki.
The scientists from Japan took cornstarch and they added enzyme or acid to turn it into a glucose syrup. The scientists in Japan added another enzyme, and that turned a bunch of the glucoses in the glucose syrup into fructoses. Now you have a very sweet fructose syrup. You can add that glucose syrup and that fructose syrup together and get any kind of combination of glucose to fructose that you want.
The beverage industry began using high fructose corn syrup in 1980 because it is 20 to 70% less expensive than sugar. That's when consumption of soda began to soar. According to the US Department of Agriculture, from 1980 to 2000, consumption went up by 40% to 440 cans of soda a year per person. In India, sales increased 10% a year since 1998, now up to 11 liters per person each year. Also in the 1980s, supersizing began. Scientists say that's when obesity, diabetes, and heart disease rates went up. So what does it take to pull off a study like this? Well, for starters, it takes food, and a lot of it. Now, this package contains 4 pre-prepared meals. How it gets divided is determined by the research team, but we're talking about breakfast, lunch, and dinner, all prepared for each and every one of the subjects. That equals 210 individual meals per person over a 10-week period.
It's a garlic chicken pasta and their sugar beverage.
And that's dinner.
Dinner.
It is the final night of the study. This is what dinner looks like in a science lab. Everything from the main course to the sugary beverage has been measured and recorded. The amount of sweetener a subject is given comes in the drink. The food supplies the daily intake of calories. Yi Lor will get to enjoy his meal. Then, like the other subjects, he will be tested with a device that measures how fast his body burns fat on this diet. No exercise is allowed. That would burn calories and skew results.
It's okay.
It's okay? Go ahead.
It's simply measuring oxygen consumption and CO2 production.
Through your breath, then?
Yes. So all we're doing is putting face masks on our subjects with a long hose that leads from their mouth to the analyzer.
So we'll do the recording for about 15 minutes.
And so it's a CO2, carbon dioxide, and oxygen analyzer. So it's just taking the air that the subject is exhaling and telling us, okay, this much oxygen, this much CO2, and from there, then we do production and consumption values. From that, fat burning, it's technically called fat oxidation, can be calculated.
This test will determine if fat burning in the liver is impaired when the liver is overloaded with the sugar fructose. There will be one more test tonight. Each of the subject's blood will be drawn, 2 vials worth.
Feeling okay?
Yeah.
And taken to the lab for a sophisticated round of blood analysis.
Okay, so I'm just removing this bottom layer, which contains our lipid fraction.
Dr. Candace Price is in charge of the lipids lab. Lipids are fats found in the blood. Her work is key to the study. We're here in the lab. Your job is to look at the blood of the study subjects and determine whether or not there's fat present in that blood, right?
Correct, yes.
Now, show me how some of this process works. The work requires a steady hand. Blood samples are reduced to components and separated into the different fats scientists are focusing on, including cholesterol.
Each tube is one subject from one time point.
There are thousands of blood samples that require meticulous care.
And so, for example, this is draw 25, meaning at one of the time points, draw 25, blood was taken, and this will represent that particular time point.
For one person.
For one person.
Each person in the study will have blood drawn 226 times over the course of the study. Once the samples are prepared, Dr. Price will use what's called a capillary tube to spread the liquid across the glass plate.
I remember these from lab.
Right?
And you repeat that across the 4 lanes here.
Correct.
For the final step in the process, some special effects are needed.
Okay, so someone can hit the lights for me. Okay. And this is a UV light, which will allow us to see the fluorescent dye. And I've already sprayed them with the fluorescent dye, which is what will allow us to see that.
Okay.
Without the dye, we can't see anything.
All right.
So here, this bottom fraction is the free cholesterol. And as we move up the plate, we see the triglyceride fraction here. And at the very top of the plate, which doesn't seem to be quite as abundant in this particular set of samples, but here we see the cholesterol ester.
So those are 3 lipids that are really important for atherosclerosis, which is a risk factor.
Yes.
The plates work much like a chart that allows researchers to see what kind of cardiovascular risk may be coming from the sweetener. By the time the study is completed, they'll have a strong database to work from, but the effects of the sweetener can be detected almost immediately.
So how quickly do you see the results in these young people?
Well, we know for sure from our previous study, our second NIH-funded study, it was only 2 weeks long. Our average subject, their age was 25, 2 weeks.
And you saw an increase in what?
The risk factors for cardiovascular disease. This study we called our dose response study because we actually fed 4 levels of high fructose corn syrup: 0, 10%, 17.5%, and 25% of energy requirement. And we saw a dose perfect stair-step response for cholesterol, for triglyceride, for uric acid.
So as you increased the intake, your risk factors increased in lockstep.
And what was very important was that even the 10% group showed increases, significant increases compared to their baseline level. That was only equivalent to handing our research subjects 1.5 cans of soda a day. So basically a half a can at breakfast, a half a can at lunch, a half a can at dinner was the equivalent. Again, a surprise. I would not have expected to see significant increases in risk factors with only a half a can per meal, but in 2 weeks. I would have believed it could have happened in 6 months, but I didn't know we would see it so quickly.
The study group that drank an artificial sweetener aspartame instead of high fructose corn syrup experienced none of those risk factors. What causes the increase in cardiovascular risk? Back in radiology, Dr. McGann explained how high fructose corn syrup affects the body.
So the anatomy that we're really looking at is this structure here, which is the liver.
Okay.
And what we do, we take specialized MRI cuts through there, and we're able to calibrate the exact amount of fat within the liver, which is important to the study. And what we see here is 2 different sets of fat, and we call this the subcutaneous fat. This would be the sort of fat that somebody could pinch on somebody if you wanted to. But then inside the muscle here, we have the visceral fat. The visceral fat is the white structure we see here. So we're trying to look at the difference between the visceral fat and the subcutaneous fat.
And there are differences in the health risks of deposition, subcutaneous versus visceral.
Yeah, so we found that in these study patients on fructose diets, they end up actually forming more visceral fat than subcutaneous fat, so that's important to the study. And then there's other metabolic effects that we found out about that. We think of fat as fat, but actually in this study, fat isn't all the same.
So your study was the first then to show that what you eat can impact where fat is deposited on the body, whether it's like the fat here versus fat elsewhere, is that right?
Right. And to the best of my knowledge, yes, we were the first. And it's important because we know for sure there's a big difference between the effects of where our fat is stored and it's our health.
But why is fructose so much worse?
That is such an important question. The enzyme for fructose is not in communication with the liver. In fact, it's always turned on, it's always working hard. Therefore, pretty much every single fructose molecule that goes through the liver via the portal vein gets pulled into the liver and gets sent down the metabolic pathway. The liver does the best it can using up all this fructose when there's still too much substrate around. The liver then turns it into fat. In our ancestors, it was easy. There wasn't much fructose around, no problem. But now we have great big 32-ounce sodas that overloads the liver with fructose. So now what happens with this fat? Well, the first thing extra fat in the liver does is cause the liver to send it out into the blood. It sends it out with little packages that include lots and lots of triglyceride, but also includes cholesterol. Immediately, blood triglycerides go up, but eventually the cholesterol levels go up too.
High fructose corn syrup appears to be behind these problems, but Dr. Stanhope says sucrose, any sugar made from sugarcane or sugar beet, may also increase liver fat. She suggests limiting intake of all types of sugars and sweeteners, brown, white, or artificial. The best advice is to stick with Mother Nature. Get your sweet fix from fresh fruit.
The only way you can overeat sugar in nature is to eat a lot of honey. That is the one naturally occurring food that's super high in sugar. Everything else, pretty low levels. Even sugar cane, where we get our commercial sucrose, is only 10% sucrose. So if you were to rely on a sugar cane to get all your sugar, you'd be gnawing for a long time.
Results from the study will take time to be completed and calculated. But for the students who've completed this leg of the research, there are more immediate concerns.
I'm going straight home and having a ginormous pizza delivered to me, fresh and hot out of the oven. I can't wait.
Oh, I've been creating a list since this started. I was gonna start with the whole pizza, large pizza, a hamburger, and then some sushi, and then just whatever I could get my hand on.
I'm really proud that I can finish it all the way.
I've been waiting for this for 2 months. I've been waiting for this pizza.
When you think about that, cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death. So we're not talking about this real obscure death and it doubles, and so instead, 10 people, now there's 20 people dying. No, it's thousands and thousands and thousands of extra deaths that can be attributed to that high level of sugar.
Huge.
Cardiovascular disease, that's our #1 killer already. We have obese children now, we have children with fatty liver, we have children with diabetes. That never used to happen. But children didn't used to have access to sugar, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and as snacks.
Extra added sugar isn't just found in sweetened drinks, it's in much of the processed food we consume. The World Health Organization recommends added sugars make up less than 10% of daily diets. But modern diets are often filled with processed foods containing high levels of added sugar. The World Health Organization's call to curb these products has gone out. The question is, who will listen? For TechKnow, I'm Dr. Shini Somara. See you next time.